Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Marsh.
Clay.
There we go, that's better. Welcome, everyone. We are so thrilled to see such a full room of attendees today. Dr. Marsh and I can't do it. Dr.
Please,
Marsh
Clay.
and I are going to have the real pleasure of framing the topic for this entire day's worth of learning and panels. And the topic is longevity. So who better to have a great conversation with than the Chancellor and Executive Dean of Health Sciences for West Virginia University. Probably everyone in this room knows you, Dr. Marsh. I think most people in this room probably know you and know of you and know of all of the work you've been leading in research and practical work at WVU. So thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
So the topic of longevity is becoming more and more fascinating to people who are thinking about the economy, thinking about what makes for a long but healthy lifespan, and the difference between how we're treating disease versus treating longevity. So can you just frame for the audience how we can better understand health span over lifespan?
That sounds good. Jen, thank you so much for all that you do, and the Benedum Foundation, the PEC, Donna, thank you for your leadership. So I love the fact that the word association with longevity was health, because to me, the definition of health is the comparison between your body's age, your biological age, and your birthday age, your chronological age. So the younger your biological age is, the healthier you are. The older your biological age is, the less healthy you are. And if you look at countries that have a very positive well span versus lifespan, or health span versus lifespan, then the countries that don't, including many countries in our world, and in fact, it's been shown by the World Health Organization that the difference in the 183 countries that they help monitor between health span and lifespan is 9.6 years. And the worst country in the world is the United States at 12.4 years.
Shocking.
So we are living longer, but not better. And the goal is to live long and to live well. And if we look at our healthcare spend, last year we spent $4.9 trillion on healthcare, which is about 18% of our GDP. And if you look at us versus other Western countries, we had worst outcomes in most of the durable metrics around healthcare, despite spending twice as much as the next average country. And if we don't do something about our healthcare spend over the next 10 years or so, by 2032, it's predicted that we'll be spending over $7 trillion a year on healthcare, which is over $20,000 per person in the US. So the way to benefit, reduce healthcare costs, and improve outcomes is to improve health. And we believe that improving health is reducing your biological age, and therefore people that live the longest and the best are models for us to study to understand what are those criteria, what are the habits, and what are the strategies that people have taken that we can uptake in our own lives to live longer and to live better.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not sustainable to think about that kind of spending without really having good outcomes. And you've spent your entire career trying to make people well and figuring out what makes people well. So can you talk a bit about the areas that, I also just want to add, there's a misconception that your genetics really set your course for life. So can you talk about where the areas of real lever are in a person's full life where they are either supporting better health span or they are undermining that in their daily life?
Well, that's a great question. And so as we start to look at the secrets from people who live long and well, we understand that about 25% of your opportunity to live long and well is driven by genetics. But what's really important is that all of us have, in general, similar information on our genetic code and our genetic information. And so it's not just what your genes show, which is the part of your genetic code that's reproduced and handed down to your children and their children, but it is the action of the environment, which is responsible for 75% of your outcomes on your genetics. And that's called epigenetics, on top of your genes. And that's important too, because you can inherit that risk as well. And so as we look at studies where people have lived long and well, the one study that many people know is the Blue Zone study. And the Blue Zones are 5 areas in the world, which is Ikaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, the Nicoya coast of Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. And people would say, well, why is Loma Linda, California part of that? It's because that's where the Seventh-day Adventists are, and they live about 10 years longer and better than the rest of the population of the country. And the work that has been done by Dan Buettner, he has a special on Netflix, How to Live 100 Years. It's really not a big secret of doing some fancy genetic, replacement or giving older people, younger people's blood, which has been tried in animal models, et cetera. It's really about living well. So these people move naturally. And it turns out that exercise is a really important bedrock of good health. And if you exercise regularly, about 30 minutes a day of walking, you can reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease by 45%. And if you walk with the most walking that people do measurably in our country, which is about 160 minutes a day, then that can equate to 11 years of lifespan increase and living better as well. And then there's eating good food. We know that ultra-processed food is bad, so eating whole food, more plant-based food, stopping eating when you're mostly full as opposed to continuing on. And then it's living with the people that you love, so having really strong relationships, strong communities. That turns out to be such an important predictor in a number of longevity studies, including the Blue Zones. Family first, meals are there to be shared, people work to live, not live to work. And then other elements that we'll hear about today, including sleep, is important. But the last one that's really important in the Blue Zone areas, as well as in many other studies, is a sense of purpose. And in Japan, they call it ikigai, which I said that during a speech with graduation, and it was real-time translated on the monitor, and they said I-C-K-Y, one word, G-U-Y, second word, but it's ikigai, I-K-I-G-A-I, which means reason for being. And so people that live long and well also continue to have a purpose, continue to have a reason to get up through their whole life.
Well, it sounds like some of the things you're pointing to, there's really a good alignment with West Virginia, particularly the community piece and family. But I know in one of our earlier conversations, you said something that really stuck with me. You said West Virginia can be viewed as a patient and a laboratory for learning. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So we know that, say, going into COVID, we were ranked as the most vulnerable state in the country. We're the 3rd oldest, and we have the most chronic health problems. So in that way, we are the patient, and we have opportunity. But we also have very creative, wonderful people like you that are here. And when we look at West Virginia, we look at life expectancy. So when we look at the United States, as much money as we spend on healthcare, we are 48th in the world in longevity. We trail the best country in the world, which is either Monaco in some studies or Hong Kong, Japan in other studies, by between 8 and 10 years of lifespan. And when we look at West Virginia, our longest lived county is Mon County, where we are now. Our shortest lived county is McDowell County. And the difference in life expectancy from someone born in Mon County to somebody born in McDowell County is 12 years. 12 years. Unacceptable. And if we look at the life expectancy in McDowell County versus the best county in the country, which is Summit County, Colorado, where Breckenridge is, that is a 20-year difference in lifespan. So ultimately, we are the test kitchen because I think we have the opportunity to be able to drive the benefits that we see in some parts of the state to the entire state and all of its people. And I'm happy to talk about maybe how we can do that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to frame what we're trying to look at today with the other panels, which is where should we really be thinking about the most productive places in the context of West Virginia, because we know health is linked to productivity and it's linked to a lot of the cost burden when you're not having a healthy lifespan. But there are just so many ways to tackle this, and I know from our earlier conversations, you've said dealing with disease, we do pretty well in America. It's costly, but we do it well. Dealing with health span, we do not do well.
True. And I think that there's a number of studies that have been done that demonstrate that fact. And I won't go through them in detail, but let me just talk about 4 studies really briefly and what they showed, because I think it's really important. So the first one, and many of you may know some of these studies, but maybe not all of them. The first one is the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And that was done by the Kaiser Foundation, 17,000 people in their health network, and they gave them a 10-question test on different types of trauma. And those traumas included, were you loved? Did you live in a safe place? Did you ever get threatened with physical or sexual violence? Did your biological parents live with you? The average score in America...
Anyone incarcerated?
Incarcerated. Did your dad beat up your mom? Did either parent go to jail? And so when we look at the score in America, 1 is the average score. And at a score of 1, every chronic disease risk goes up. If your score is 4, then your risk of depression goes up by 400%, your risk of suicide by 1,200%, and your lifespan goes down by 4.7 years predictably. And then if your score is 6, J.D. Vance's score in Hillbilly Elegy was 7, your lifespan is reduced by up to 20 years. Now that presumes you don't have people in your life that love you and help you recover from this, because there are resilience opportunities with that as well. And these were questions at every age asking people to remember when they were 18 or younger. So a lot of this was your perception. So that's the ACEs study, really an important study that says that the way that you experience your young life and the traumas that you were exposed to causes disease throughout your life. And so helping children with that is important, because if you do have these traumas, your brain rewires differently, you do have these epigenetic events which can cause your body to age. And the higher your ACE score is, the more likely you are to be obese. So obesity and overweight, and if you add obesity plus overweight, we are the worst state in the country. We're second to Mississippi on pure obesity. The second study was from a Nobel Prize winner in San Francisco named Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize for telomeres, which are the ends of your DNA. And every time your cells divide, get older, that gets chopped off, these telomeres do. So the shorter your telomeres, the older your cells are. And they did a study, Alyssa Appel, a behavioral psychologist, and Elizabeth Blackburn did a study on 59 women in San Francisco, highly educated, really healthy, and controlled for all of the bad habits, including smoking and everything else. And what they found was, and I'll cut to the chase, so they found that these women were given a stress questionnaire. It's called the Perceived Stress Survey, and it's 10 questions on how you see the world. Do you see the world as dangerous and threatening and fearful, or do you see it as safe and welcoming and loving? And dividing the 59 women who answered these questions into quartiles and comparing the highest scoring quartile, the most stressful way to see the world chronically and for the longest time and intensity, with the least stressful way to see the world, they found that the telomeres, measuring those telomeres in these women's cells, that the women that had the highest stress levels were aging 9 to 17 years more than the women that didn't. And the average age of these women was 38 years old. So the way that we see the world is a really important parameter on our impact from that. The third
That's really amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
Third study, really briefly, is the study by Angus Deaton and Ann Case from Princeton that described deaths of despair and hopelessness, initially finding that there were a group of white, non-Hispanic men and women, high school educated or less, and mostly less, that were dying at a rate in the early, in the 2018, 2019 range, that they changed the life expectancy of our country and made it go down for the first time since the World Wars, and they were dying of suicide, overdose, and alcoholism. And what they found was that the center of this was in Appalachia, the Ohio River Valley, and they found they were dying like this because of the loss of jobs and the loss of income and the feeling that they didn't have the worth they did before. And so as we go forward, we also find that the same investigators did, that if you look at people with college degrees and people with high school degrees or less, if you compare people with college degrees to people with high school degrees, there's an 8.5 year lifespan improvement. And if you look at people without college degrees, there's 11-year lifespan difference between the two. So education is a really important opportunity to get good jobs, to get income, social capital, to feel like you belong and that you're valued. And the last study was by our previous Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, that said he thought the real epidemic in the United States was an epidemic of loneliness and social isolation. And when you look at particularly younger people, over half the people in our country report feeling lonely or socially isolated. And when you look at the impact of that, then that can lead to a 15-year reduction in your lifespan. So just how you see the world. And that's also one of the social determinants of health, how strong your relationships are and how much you feel connected to your community, to your family, and to your purpose.
Yeah, I've so appreciated the public awareness around Vivek Murthy for the youth of today. We know that this idea of being lonely and disconnected is just a growing problem, and the fact that it's central to the epigenetic side of it is we all should be concerned about that.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting, there's studies out that demonstrate that if you look at the top 1% of wage earners in our country and the bottom 1%, then you see that the top 1% men have a 14.6 lifespan benefit, and the top 1% women a 10-year lifespan benefit. But that benefit is not always associated with happiness and joy. And one of the things that gives us happiness and joy that's really important, in a book called The Book of Joy, which is the 2 or 3 week meeting between the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama said he believes the only 2 ways that we really experience joy is one is the recognition of the deep connection between all people and all things. And if we have time, I'll talk just for a second about how quantum physics may support that.
Why not?
Yes, indeed. And the second thing is service to others. And it turns out that service to others is a great strategy to improve your well span, your health span, as opposed to just your lifespan. And Mother Teresa, I think, said it best. She said, help every person, don't count numbers, and start with the person closest to you. I love that.
Good words to live by. Well, so we've seen the continuum of where people end up living shorter, sicker, sadder lives. But you've just named really some of the big drivers that can lift all of that, education being an important one, connection. If you were to look at West Virginia and your hope for where the state could be in 20 years, what does that look like?
You know, Jen, I think that we have such a beautiful state, and the people that live in our state are incredible people. There's a joke about how do you know if your car breaks down in West Virginia? And the answer is because everybody stops. And I think that,
True.
Anthony Bourdain, before he died, he did a show in southern West Virginia, and he said he came expecting it to have a bunch of people that were uneducated and, and drug addicted. And he said that when he experienced our state, and he was in the southern part of our state, he said it was incredible. The beauty, the people's resilience. They could cook with things that he couldn't. No matter how much money people had, everybody welcomed him into their home and shared what they had. And he said, he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post afterwards, and he said he really debated about writing this article because he didn't want to destroy the secret. And he said the people in West Virginia seemed generally happy, the people he met as well. So I think that we have such a great foundation to work with, but we also know that we have one of the worst workforce participation rates in the country. We know that varies by county. Mon County has a good workforce participation rate. Some of our southern counties don't. So I think it's really about preparing all of our people for great lives, for great jobs. I think it was Shakespeare Hamlet that said, "There's nothing good nor bad. It is only thinking that makes it so." And Anna Nin, who is a French poet and philosopher, said, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are." And so the power of our perception, the power of us seeing the world as threatening and dangerous and scarce with resources versus abundant and loving and safe makes the biggest difference. Project Aristotle, Google's study of their highest performing teams found that the teams with the highest degrees of psychological safety were the ones that produced the best, not the happiest, the most productive. And Abraham Maslow reminds us that the levels of human needs psychologically, we need our reflexes, physiology, then we need safety, psychological and physical, love, self-esteem, self-actualization, and self-enlightenment. And so as we look at West Virginia, I think we need to help change the perception that we may have about ourselves. We also need to connect to a sense of purpose, and I think preparing our children for great lives, comes through education and loving them and nurturing them, which is what many people in this room do, so thank you for that. And then the power of connection, the power of neighborhood, the power of community is so strong. In all the longevity studies, that is the most important thing. And the better your social networks and the better your relationships and the more people you feel like are your friends and confidants, the longer and the better you live. So I think there's many things that we can do, and these are all within our control to do. It's not some fancy, difficult, complicated thing. It's living well and serving each other.
Yeah, a free change of lifestyle. Well, and this event has really been launched as a way to build connection and just a learning community. So this is also another place to start. Maybe there's a mindfulness curriculum for kids in school so they can learn this early, or, I believe strongly also in the ACEs assessment early on for children so that we really can support them better. What do you think about the people that are living into advanced age in a healthy way that might be in their 80s and 90s? Is it just continuing to move and keep connection at that point?
Yeah, and there's a number of things that play into people that live long and well. I talked a little bit about the Blue Zone people, which are the 5 countries where people have historically lived long and very well. But I think what's really important, if I was going to put them in a bit of a hierarchy, I would say number 1, it's the strength of your relationships. And it turns out that when a married couple is happy at 50, then that relationship predicts long lifespan for both.
Wow.
But if the husband dies first, the wife does okay. If the wife dies first, the husband's in trouble. So I would say once again,
we all know why.
Proving the more resilient sex of the two. So, but the strength of your relationship is really important. The maintenance of purpose. So it turns out that people that continue to work past 65 tend to live longer and many times better. than people that don't, because these are people that are engaged with what they're doing, and it doesn't have to be a job that you're getting paid for.
Service.
It can be volunteerism, it can be service, and I think that that's so important. The third thing, and we mentioned it really in the San Francisco mom study, that the way you see the world is so very important, and that is within our control. Because if you look at the facts, there's a book named Factfulness by a guy named Hans Rosling, who's died since. But he demonstrated that today the world is better, safer, richer in almost every way than it's ever been before, but we don't see it that way. And when we see things as dangerous, we kick into our survival mechanism, which is our sympathetic nervous system, and that makes us wary of other people. It causes us to separate. Because in the old days, if you were outed by your community, you died. So we are very hardwired for relationships and for that security that we get. And communities needed to be big enough to protect each other, but small enough to feed each other. And an anthropologist named Robin Dunbar came up with a number, 150, that's known as Dunbar's number, which is about the biggest size community you could have survived with. And today it's about the most people you can know. So how you see the world is so important. And then exercise is really important. Keep moving. 30 minutes of exercise a day. It turns out that as little as 2,000 steps a day gives you improvement on cardiovascular protection. About 8,000 steps a day gives you about maximal protection at any age. And then the more you walk, for each hour that you walk, you get about 169 minutes of extra lifespan. So it's about 3 times the benefit in lifespan from your exercise. We're going to hear about sleep, which is also very important, and we can't survive without sleep. And then I think the foods we eat is so critical, and eating a really good diet with real foods is so important. Anything that can sit on your shelf for weeks at a time and you can still eat it is probably not something you want to put in your body. Yes.
You want it to be made by a plant, not in a plant.
That's right, exactly. And if I could just say real quick, Jen, one of the things that I think is so important, and there's other really thoughtful books, one I really love called Finite and Infinite Games by an author named James Carse. But the way we look at ourselves in the world, whether we look at a lens where we have to earn our way forward, where we have to compete, and for our immortality, we have to struggle, versus that we want to help each other, that we're all immortal beings, we're all eternal beings having a human experience. And if you look at quantum physics, which is the study of science beyond our senses, there is a observation called quantum entanglement that is so important that I think it's important that people recognize that. And what that means is if you take 2 small entities, whether they're photons of light, or you cut an electron in half, or you cut DNA in half, and you separate these 2 pieces by any distance over any time, if you activate one, the other activates immediately in the opposite direction 100% of the time, faster than the speed of light. And Einstein discovered it but didn't believe it, because he said nothing's faster than the speed of light. But what this means, I think, is that everything is ultimately really connected. And we are all really connected. So one of the reasons why service to others may be so powerful is because if we're really all connected, the only way maybe that you get served is by serving somebody else. And I think you have to do that from your heart. And that, to me, is the definition of abundance. Because if I have all I need, I can share with you selflessly, and that makes both of us better.
Yeah, that's lovely. It makes me think of there's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote that goes something to the effect of, I can't be who I need to be until you can become who you need to become. Yes. And it's a similar idea. Well, you did get to end with quantum physics. Yes. Great, Dr. Marsh, terrific. Well, we are basically hitting up against our time. I'm sure there's lots of questions in the audience that we'll have to bleed into our next panels, but are there aspects of the rest of the day that you're really looking forward to? I mean, I think that the research around sleep is really becoming one of the greatest public awareness pieces for people. It's frustrating a lot of people who don't sleep well, but I think it's a really important, all these things you mentioned are essentially free. It's about connecting, giving back, thinking about others, valuing education, and then sleep is another one of those pieces. Are there aspects of the program today that really stand out for you?
Well, I think that the quality and the level of the speakers is really incredible today. Dr. Joe Maroon is one of my personal heroes, so I'm so excited to hear from
Dr.
Joe.
Maroon in the corner over there.
Yes,
Yay!
he's amazing. And then about the sleep, and then starting to think about how healthcare needs to be able to incorporate health and well-being as part, and WellSpan as part of our focus, because ultimately we want to be leaders in all the right areas. But this is going to be a fantastic day, and I think it's wonderful to celebrate Gordon Gee and his legacy, another personal hero of mine. And Jen, again, thank you for all that you do, and the Benedum Foundation, and Donna, thanks for all you do. It is great to be in a room with so many people that have the intentions to help and serve others as a way to express their love for our state and our people.
Agreed. Well, thank you for that. With that, we are going to exit stage right.
Okay.
And I think Donna's going to come up and MC the next piece.